Hi everyone, we are back for another episode of Breakdown. This is the third one. Today we got a couple of topics to talk about. We're once again having a look at the metagame, the last ban announcement, which I don't think we've talked about on the channel yet. Maybe in a passing comment in the last few videos or something like that, but not comprehensively at least. And some cards that we like and that are underplayed today. Yeah, and we will be joined, or no, I'm joined by Felix as always.
Da-da-da. You're not
There he is.
alone, Kinky. Cheers,
I
guys.
know, I'm not. Yeah, so up first, I'd say we can talk briefly about the cards banned in September now. So 2 months ago. Yeah,
Yes, which were Vinota, Maddening Hex, and Asmo, I guess.
hmm
So I was personally not very happy about those changes since I was a lot into Asmo and I wanted to run her on our last German tournament. But well, that's what the committee decided, so I had to
yeah,
change to another Tevesh combination, and we
yep.
will catch up on that later on.
Winota seemed like a bit of a preemptive ban. I don't think we saw any like big tournament finishes, but seemed like
Oh, I think
were they?
there were quite a few, maybe not finishes, but a lot of top 8 presents,
Yeah.
and
I
I
mean, during the Inala Ragavan time, I think I saw one in Prague in the big tournament.
yeah, right. I think at that time people didn't consider that deck
Yeah, yeah.
to play.
And Maddening Hex segues us well into the first deck we'll talk about. The Red Deck Wins has been winning tournaments or placing well in top eights of big 50, 60 man events. So that's always good to see. I think that's usually a sign of health in the format when you have a top eight with at least one Red Deck Win finish. It also gives budget players something to play that's competitive. So I really like having a meta like that.
Yeah, definitely. I think and I guess many players might join me on that opinion that Red Deck Wins always should be some kind of meta police. Like, at least that's my philosophy. Like, when building a deck, you should keep in mind that when you enter a tournament, there is a certain amount of Red Deck Wins player, or at least you in 7 rounds you will face one Red Deck Wins, and you should be ready for this matchup. Means maybe not having like a 20% matchup chance against those decks.
Yep, definitely.
And yeah, as you said, it's in a good spot, and I appreciate that.
Yep. Another sort of commander that we think is in a good spot is Tevesh. We,
Definitely.
I think in the last breakdown, I talked a little bit about not really being sure if the card was too strong or not. By now, I've played four different Tevesh decks, and Felix has played two,
Yeah, right.
and both of us think he's fine. All the decks that Tevesh enables wouldn't be seen in the meta otherwise, and I think it's totally fine to have that card
Yeah,
around. It's a bit difficult for aggro decks to beat in the late game, but a lot of the aggro decks are either faster or they have some form of flying creatures, which are usually very tough to handle for the Tevesh decks.
correct.
So I think most decks have a chance to beat Tevesh.
Yeah, and I mean there aren't really any powerful 3-color combinations with Tevesh. Like,
Absolutely.
you have tried pair Tevesh with Tana. Tana is
hmm
a pretty
Jumped.
bad card. We've seen some Abzan combinations with Zida in Prague. So if you look at Zida at face value, it's not really a good card. I mean, it's okay. You can build some stuff around it, but it's not like the 4-drop you want to cast these days. Probably a bit similar to Tana, although I would say it's better than Tana. But apart from that, you could come up with Kudele, she's called, I guess, to have a Sultai pile. So yeah, in a nutshell, I think all of those 3-color combinations are not really that good, and the other single color commanders that are left aren't that good either. People pair it with Malcolm and Livio and or Miara and whatsoever, and all those cards are, yeah,
Pretty bad.
pretty
They're
bad.
usually bears in the command zone for 2 or 3 mana,
Exactly.
which
I think
just
we talked about that at the last episode as well, and that's exactly what Samuel has mentioned. Tevesh gives some color combinations that usually would not see play in any other way, because the single commanders that are available are just too bad to make a deck a run. Tevesh gives some room for these color combinations. For example, the Dimir pile.
Yep.
I can't really imagine. I mean, is there a valid Dimir deck, like define valid? Okay, but a tier 1, I think there is none. Like
Exactly.
you could play a Scarab God and some other weird stuff. We had the newest fairy on cam once, I guess. I don't even know how she's called.
I mean, you could play Lazav Dreadnought deck in general and have a Dreadnought in graveyard, but
Right.
with all the random graveyard removal that you have, that's quite a lot worse of a strategy than it was in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it's always good to have at least weak partners in the meta to enable strategies that you normally don't see.
Oh, you can play the best deck. You can play Sick Tempo.
You
So
can play some tempo.
you
Yes,
finally
Martin has
have
played that
another deck
before, and
to.
he's
you have another deck to add your Bazaar Trade Mage to.
Yep, exactly. Another point that we kind of wanted to address that has been creeping up on. I mean, it's ever present. It's 5-color Magic. There's a couple of developments recently that have just kind of pushed 5-color Magic into a direction that might be getting close to being unhealthy to the format, but I think is still fine at the moment. So with the Modern Horizons 2 slots, there have just been a couple of cards that you can play in that deck that just make it a lot stronger. Cards like Prismatic Ending, cards like Ragavan, and overall there is just a lot of 5-color commanders. There's Prismatic Bridge, there's Niv Mizzet, there's
Golos.
to a lesser degree nowadays. What's
That's
the last
correct,
one?
because of. So we've done a short poll on that some time ago, a few weeks ago, because we were just curious which 5-color decks you usually face the most, or which are the most difficult for you to handle. And surprisingly, I was told that people have a lot of trouble dealing with the Prismatic Bridge because it dodges the creature interruption, and also Niv Mizzet because of the card advantage the deck provides. And
Yep.
so we had like 130 votes or something, and people voted for exactly that. Like we had like 34% for Izika and 38% for Niv Mizzet, which was quite interesting because at least here in Germany we don't see a lot of 5-color Magic for several
Absolutely.
reasons. I mean, first of all, our local tournaments also feature a lot of red deck wins because not all of those players are into the format for years, and most of us have like a bigger card pool, and so we can give those guys whatever, like most often a red deck,
Yep.
maybe white weenie, and then they just pick up the deck and participate with red deck wins. And most often we include Blood Moon, and if you have like 6 rounds facing 2 times red deck wins, and the chances of losing against Blood Moon is there.
Anyways, you can lose to Blood Moon when you play 5-color Magic.
You definitely can. Yeah,
that's absolutely a possibility.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so what I was trying to say, like for several reasons, 5-color Magic isn't that popular, at least here in our local group, and from what we've seen. Yeah, go ahead.
I think another reason is just that some of us just don't like to play it. Like the people that do have the pool to play it often like to play partners, often like to play more synergistic commanders, and aren't that into playing 5-color Magic. Your last 5-color commander was Najila, and after that I don't. Oh, and after Thrasios and Tumna got banned, you picked up Kenrith for a little bit.
That's correct. Right? But I mean, we are experimenting from time to time with that, right?
Yeah.
You have played Tiamat on the last tournament, and it was a fun deck.
I did.
You've played a lot of Golos in various forms.
Yep.
I've picked up Izika a couple of times. I've also, at least on cam, I've tried Niv Mizzet Reborn. You've played the Yor Dragon, so we are experimenting with 5-color Magic. But in the end,
we are.
Yeah, like in the end, we never decide to, or rarely decide to take a 5-color commander for tournament purposes.
Yep.
Nevertheless, those decks are pretty good. The question
is,
and
they're winning tournaments, and yeah. So I don't think there's anything that you can do to the ban list to just like make the whole archetype worse. You just have to closely monitor any 5-color creatures that have potential to be commanders or that are being played as commanders and see if they're too strong for the format.
So I think there's one thing that people always, or not always, come up with, but something that people have in mind is unbanning back to basics in order to deal with those multicolored decks. Do you think that's a reasonable punishment, or?
I think the decks that struggle against 5-color decks aren't blue decks.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
I
I
don't,
would
I
agree
don't
on that.
think that blue needs the tools to deal with 5-color magic. I think blue has plenty of tools to do that kind of stuff. So I don't really think that's a good solution.
Mm-hmm.
Because I personally like a format where all colors are at least kind of a little evenly represented. Whereas like in formats like German Highlander or something like that, you have a very, very blue friendly ban list, and that's a huge chunk of the meta is just people playing some combination of blue deck, which I don't like. They like it
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they play it and it's fun for them, but I think having a large spread in colors is cool.
Yeah. That's always interesting. Like in terms of how does a, not necessarily the format philosophy looks like, but like somehow the majority of a format always defines a format in a certain way. I mean, of course, there are formats like Archon that are much more into involving people into decision making compared to Duel Commander.
Hmm.
But okay, and I also, maybe we get a bit lost here if I continue on that one, because I don't know how the ban procedure in Highlander works, but that's for another day maybe.
They have a committee
Yeah, of course
as
they do,
well.
but like in which way they include the decisions or opinions of the community
They have
to
representatives.
okay, okay, okay.
So it's sort of like the regional coordinators, except the committee is made up of the regional coordinators.
Ah, I see. All right.
Yep.
Interesting.
So a little more democratic than Dual Commander.
Yeah. So it's really format defined. Interesting. Okay, back to Duel Commander. Another deck that we've talked a couple of times already about. Last time we talked about some potential inclusions. When I talk about I'm talking about Martin and me in the latest set review we've done regarding the new Innistrad set. And the deck I'm talking about is again this shit. Zithus.
Sithis.
This
Yep,
is yes.
that's the one.
Oh Jesus. Yeah, I think it's pretty much an underdog. Like I think the deck has a lot of strong matchups. So, some are not that good as well, but it sees more and more play. Of course, we've talked about that already. The card pool is very specific,
Hmm.
so it's not that easy for people to get the cards. And I think it's also because some cards are stupidly expensive, even if they're not pimped. For example, Sarah Sanctum,
Yep,
because it's a reserved list card, and that's
yep.
something you really want to have in a deck. Like,
It's sort of essential, yeah.
exactly, yeah. So that's one thing, and the other thing is that not many players, at least I don't know that many players who enjoy to play Enchantress, but nevertheless, it's getting more and more popular. And yeah, the question is if it's that annoying at some point that people will try to get rid of it. What do you think about it? You've played it on your own.
I have. I've played it on cam. Mm, I think it's a cool deck. I think there's a lot of different variations that you can build. There's a lot you can do. That you have a lot of flexibility because there's so many different styles of enchantments. I think there could be problematic aspects to it. I think it might sort of go into a similar region that Baral is in, where it's just unfun to play against sometimes,
Mm, that's my
and
concern as
it
well.
can take a long time to win. However, for example, there was a new enchantment, a mythic one printed in the last Innistrad set.
Yeah, that's the one we featured.
That gives a win condition that's a bit better than other win conditions in the deck. So I think I don't see it as problematic. It might be better than I think it is at the moment, but it's definitely not like a super powerful deck that absolutely needs to get banned.
Yeah,
But I think it gives a different. It gives you a different play style than a lot of other decks. So you could. Oh, it's probably fun to play.
yeah, and that's probably what makes it so interesting to players. It's just something completely different compared to what you can usually pick up. Like
Yep.
it's not the standard archetype.
Yeah. And finally, we have a couple of slots that have been impressing us or proving themselves to us lately. One of those being Sviloon,
Yes.
the new legendary Merfolk from Modern Horizons 2.
It's funny,
Just
like
an
the list
all
of
around the list of.
good male folks is growing. Like
It is. It is.
back in the days, we were talking about Trunir Nemesis. Then there was Thrasios. Then there was Tassa's Oracle, which got banned.
Yep. Yep.
And now we have Sriloon. So
Yep. Swiloon just being like an all-around great card in the 99, not necessarily as a commander, just having it in your deck, playing it on turn 3 or on turn 5 with a counterspell open, and after that, if it's the 3/4 body is just so hard to block for most decks, and you get in damage, you draw cards, and that's exactly what you want to be doing with a deck that plays it on turn 3 or on turn 5. So all-star playing with and against it from my perspective.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I really like the card, especially because you don't need to connect to draw a card, which makes it very powerful. And most often your opponent is in a hurry to handle the card once you drop it. And yeah, we have experimented with it, so to say, like playing mid-rangey decks, playing control decks, and we've just slammed it into any pile, and it was always performing great. Huge fan of the card.
Next card would be Portable Hole. When it
Mm.
came out, the both of us thought interesting card, maybe not quite good enough because it doesn't handle things above 3, but in your average game, it's going to see a target.
Yeah, and
You're going to be
especially
able to kill someone
for
with it,
for the
something.
decks that are not very dense in removal spells. Like I've touched White Weenie for some time recently, and I've also played. Did I play Portable Hole in White Weenie? I guess I did.
I think you did. Yeah.
Yes. I'm currently playing a Jeskai control pile, which is also happy about more good white disruption, because usually you have a problem with a Jitte or a Ragavan or whatsoever. Like these days there are so many early drops that are important to get rid of, and this card's just a great addition to any deck
Yep.
that is in need of early game interaction. Of course, I mean, the card is not permanently removed because your opponent might have an abrade or whatsoever to get rid of it again, but nevertheless, it's a great card. And there might even be some interactions in which you can search for an artifact, like some decks play Enlightened Tutor. That's definitely not your first choice, but it's another option. I mean,
Mhm.
and the more flexible your slots are, the better they probably are. Like
Yep.
you have the
Absolutely.
option, and there might be 1 in 100 games in which you choose to search for a portable hole because your parallax wave is not able to get rid of artifacts, but your portable hole is. So you're
Yep.
going to search for it, just for
Yep.
an example. And
Yeah.
closely connected to this one, we have another outperformer, a card that I was thinking about. It's a good card, but it's not insane. But Prismatic Ending is really an insane card because I mean the card doesn't scale that good, obviously, because first you need to have the color variation in order to deal with CMC 4 and 5 permanents, unless your opponent has an Urborg or Yavimaya on field, or you have City of Brass, Mana Confluence, or any mana color land. But as we said so many times, the early game is getting more and more and more important, and the card is just dealing with everything, and it even exiles cards, which is great. So I became a huge fan of the card.
Yep. And it also takes care of things like Utopia Sprawl or Wild Growth,
Right.
um,
And
and
back in the
just
days, it was
blowing
like,
that.
oh, I had the bolt, but you didn't play the bird. It's
Yep.
like, yeah, I
Exactly.
had my wild growth, so I get my 3 drop, whatever you do.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a cool one as well.
Exactly. And the last card, which you put on the table, I haven't played it yet since it came out, is Lose Focus. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Definitely, I think it's an underestimated counterspell. So we've been talking about it prior to recording already. I will just introduce it with I lost my focus, which is totally fine. So the thing about the card is that for decks that play more colors, so 3, 4, 5 colors, I haven't seen it in any 5-color deck yet, but currently there aren't any, or there aren't that many 4-color decks. Is that true? Not sure about it. I need to think about it. I think there aren't many 4-color decks that play counter magic. That might be a correct statement. However, if you play like 3-color decks, for example, Leovold or maybe even Aminatu, that are very dense in colored mana, I personally prefer to play spells early in the game that are not very color intense. So to say, it's harder to cast a counterspell on turn 2 in a 3-color deck than a loose focus. So, I mean, there are more spells, obviously, Mana Leak and Miscalculation and whatsoever, but now in comparison to those other spells, they lose in value the longer the game goes. And this card, if you have the mana open for it, and most often you have in late game, you always have a safe counterspell. And one aspect I really like about the card is that you cannot lose counterfights with this card, because since you're adding more copies to the stack, the opponent would have to interact with all of those copies instead of just having one spell to counter. And I think it will see more and more play. I think it's just a card our format is asking for, like having a early game and late game flexibility. It's a perfect combination of that, and I'm just a huge fan of it.
Yeah, that seems absolutely fair. I think it's always good to have it's always good when new cards are printed that make deck building more interesting. When you're able to say you want to build a certain deck, and instead of a year ago we had 110 cards for the deck, or if you don't consider lands, you have 70 or 80 spells for the deck, and every year that kind of increases, and we end up with 80 or 90 or 90 to 100.
Right.
And I think it's always good when you see a card that isn't an auto include necessarily, because you don't, like, for example, in the old Ravnica set, Quench was printed. And Quench, I haven't seen Quench in a list since. I think I saw it in one list after it was printed.
Yeah, only Pauper.
And yeah, and nothing after that. So obviously Quench isn't good enough, but Miscalculation is. Even if Miscalculation is cast as Miscalculation and not cycled, like say 90% of the time, those 10% of cycling the card make it good enough to be played in most blue decks.
Yeah.
But not being able to cycle the card isn't good enough to be played in most blue decks. And I think that's mostly the effect, or the reason is because you need late game scalability in a taxing counterspell. So either Mana Leak, which does enough, or like Evasive Action, which does enough. Paying 3 mana or 4 mana is enough to warrant playing it, or being able to do something more with it, like you can with Miscalculation, and like you can with Lose Focus. So having those interesting deck building decisions, I think, is very cool, and I always welcome new cards that enable that.
Right. And it also, I think it adds a interesting layer of decision making, but as an opponent, like thinking about, okay, my opponent has like 3 mana open, 2 blue, what does that signalize? Like back in the day, if you might have thought of a counterspell or force of negation whatsoever. Now it can be a loose focus. And I mean, most often it doesn't change your decision making if your decision is very streamlined, or you only have this line of play to choose. But there might be situations in which you can expect it and probably play around it.
Yep.
So it's something you should have in mind. Maybe not these days, but let's talk about that in 6 months or something. I mean, Livio Malcolm and other Malcolm combinations are getting more and more popular. So blue magic is definitely a huge part of the metagame currently, at least
Yep.
I would say. And maybe one or another also explores the power of loose focus for themselves. If that wasn't a good outro, I don't know. Anyways, yeah, I think we wrap it up here.
Yep, we've covered a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
A bit of food for thought for everyone.
And by the way,
enjoy it.
if you guys have anything to add here, if you have any topics that you would like us to talk about, you may write that down in the comments and we can pick it up in the next breakdown session.
Absolutely. We're happy to talk about anything that we have things to say about. And I think that's pretty much everything. So,
yeah.
Yep.
You can also address it on our Discord server.
Mhm.
Link is down in the description. You can also subscribe to our channel. You will find the subscribe button on YouTube. Surprise. And with that being said, have a good morning, day, evening, whenever you're
Night,
listening to
weekend,
us.
whatever you're looking forward to
Exactly.
as you watch this video.
All right. See you next time.
See you next time.